Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, how will the Paris attacks impact the fate of refugees? We look at the debate Western countries are having over who can enter their borders. So the focus of today's conversation is looking at Syrian refugees and what's happened in the last couple of days regarding their plight. We did some research. We've been talking to quite a few people. Malika?
Exactly. Well, one of the people we talked to is a Syrian refugee in Europe, and he talked to us about some of his fears, unfortunately, after the attacks. His name is Fadi, and he traveled by foot, bus, train, and a boat, crossing Lebanon and Turkey, Greece to Macedonia, Serbia, Hungary, and Austria, before finally arriving in Germany, where he spoke to the stream.
We are afraid now because of the situation. Maybe it will change. The people, maybe they will hate us, or they are hate us already now after the attacks. We have a mind. We can work. We are hard workers, and I think they know that already. I need to create my new life, you know. So I said to them, don't be afraid from us. If I go back, that means the terrorists, maybe they will take me to fight with them, or the army will take me to fight with him. So what I have to do? I don't want to fight.
His is just one story out of so many. Well, if you have a story you want to share with us, tweet #AJStream.
The possibility that one of the Paris attackers used a fake Syrian passport to pose as a refugee has called into question resettlement policies in Europe and other Western nations. Since ISIL's deadly attacks last week, parts of Europe have stepped up border controls. Poland responded by saying it would no longer accept Syrian refugees, and at least 30 US states voiced their concern over taking in Syrians. So, how will attitudes like these impact the future of refugees fleeing war? With us to talk about this, we have, via Skype in Paris, France, Bayan Al-Fadl, a Syrian refugee who left her home country in 2013. She was formerly a relief worker for an NGO in Syria. In Berlin, Germany, Elias Perabo is co-founder of the group Adopt a Revolution, which provides support for Syrian refugees in Germany. In Brussels, Belgium, Stephen Wolf, migration spokesman for the UK Independence Party. And in Paris, France, Yasser Louati is the spokesman for the Collective Against Islamophobia in France. So good to have you here, everybody. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Ilyas, in Germany is well known for having a very empathetic, compassionate approach to the Syrian refugee crisis. What kind of conversations are people having today? Did the attacks in Paris on Friday, have they had an impact on how Germany feels?
Yes, I would say it had an impact, especially in the beginning. I mean, people were curious, people were with fear, but I think people understood very quickly that the refugees who are coming to Germany, especially those ones who are coming from Syria, are the same ones who are fleeing from the terror we have seen in Paris and other places. So these are the people who have been the victims of this terror, either by ISIS or by the Assad regime or other rebels. So I mean, and that's why it actually turned out a little bit into forms of solidarity. So people thought, okay, we are not only seeing the victims in France, but we are also starting to see the people who are coming here and asking for our help.
See, that's quite intriguing. Yasser, you're there in France, in Paris. What's the difference between those two reactions, would you say, between what's happening in France and what's happening in Germany?
Unfortunately, in France, the refugee question now is being used as a powerful electoral card, meaning that the current so-called left-wing government has not been able to counterattack the Marine Le Pen or far-right-wing rhetoric on this matter. So now the attacks in Paris gave them almost an open boulevard to implement all the ideas by this, extreme group. But unfortunately, again, this will again be counterproductive, because on the long run, questions are being raised that with this question of shutting down borders, if we are not already, hampering the European construction. We start with the borders, we implement extreme security measures, then what? The refugees are already here, and they are not here for fun. They fled the very same wars that we conducted most of the time. Think of Iraq, for example.
Go ahead.
Can I quickly just add something? Because I think what is very similar is that also in Germany, sort of the conservatives and right wings are pushing this case and just using it for the rhetoric against foreigners. However, what I think the difference is that we have a conservative government, and we have with Merkel, our sort of chancellor, and she actually got forward and said these words and said, we're gonna not continue, we're not gonna quit with our values, we're gonna stand by these refugees, and we're going to continue to help them. I think and this made a big difference, that she really got out there and showed that she has leader qualities.
And it's that word of rhetoric, Ilyas, that you used, Stephen, that I'm seeing people online talk about as well. So this is Nadeem Smith on Twitter. He says, one of the misconceptions out there is that Syrian refugees who are fleeing persecution are in fact causing harm. Another person writes in that they're being unfairly blamed. Bombers were French nationals and Belgians. One fake passport and the world has lost its mind. So, Stephen, I want your thoughts on whether you think refugees are now being unfairly blamed.
Well, I take a different view. I don't think that the refugees themselves are being unfairly blamed here at all. What is being said is that it is the open door policy of being able to travel everywhere freely from, say, Greece all the way to Sweden, in what the European Union system calls the free movement of people through Schengen, which is called into question. Because no one is going to suggest that the 1.3 million people who are the refugees coming not just from Syria but all across the world are actually terrorists. What they are saying is that they need to identify the small numbers who are the terrorists and using this open door system to get in. We know it's not just the one person or the two people that are suggested were already coming across as terrorists in this particular instance, but it was the free movement of the leader, the ringleader, who helped cause this, who went backwards and forwards several times. So the call is to ensure that we monitor those people who come across as refugees more concisely, more effectively, and the only way to do that is by having border controls.
Stephen, I'm looking here at a New York Times update on who the Paris attackers were, are, and their nationalities. So if we look in these two columns here, they were either French or they were Belgian. So they would have had French or Belgian passports, and they could go wherever they wanted to go pretty much with their passports. So what difference does border control have in the situation where we're talking about French nationals or Belgian nationals? How would that have stopped what happened on Friday?
But what we also know is that the ringleader actively, whilst he was a member of ISIS, used ISIL videos and material to say how easily he was able to use passports such as Syrians' passports to be able to come backwards and forwards across Europe from the Mediterranean. So he was able to use the empathy that people have towards those who are genuinely fleeing terror and persecution for their own nefarious needs. And he also therefore supported the very idea of ISIS, who said in the summer that they would flood Europe with terrorists. Now, we're not going to say that whether it's 100,000 or 10,000. What we do know is they only need to get in a small cell of people to cause the damage that are in place. And what it is a very important part of all governments, is to protect the people in their countries. And those people in the countries are those who live there and those who come to settle there, or those who come on holiday there. So that is the duty of government. And if in these circumstances, in a time when ISIS is saying that we will actually come over and cause more terror, then I think it's sensible for governments to adopt an approach which would have border controls just to monitor those people coming through.
Ilyas, what do you want to add?
Well, these people are monitored anyway. All the refugees who come here to Germany are going to be registered. They live here. The people we had in France were not even refugees. They just sort of traveled on their passports. They were able to travel from outside the European Union with inside the European Union, places where you actually have borders, where the European Union tried for decades to prevent not these people that are coming in. We're not going to have 100% security. And I think building up more borders just destroys more the idea of the European Union. And this is sort of what really makes me sad about this, because if we think Europe has moved forward, and in the last 20 years we have become one Europe without borders, we have seen a lot of movement here, and now because of this terror event, people want to go back in time and reinstate these borders between the states. I think this is not the way we should go. We should move forward. Yes, we have to see at security measures. There has been a lot of security lately in Europe, but it's not the way to go back by the wheel, but to move forward in Europe.
Ilyas, picking up on going back in time, I actually want to read, I just want to read this tweet, picking up on what Ilyas said. This is from another Ilyas, his name is Ilyas Qasem. He says, 3 months ago, we saw Europeans holding that refugees welcome banner, but now we see they're closing their doors after the Paris attacks. So Bayan, I want to bring you in here because you're the person that, you know, this tweet is talking about. You're there in Europe now. How are you feeling after the Paris attacks?
Well, first, it's not easy on us to. First, we all the Syrian actually sorry for what's happening in France. We are very compassionate about what's happening. We are not agree with what's happening, and what I'm saying that because that we are refugee here and we hadn't have that long time here, so we already have our problem. We have already our. Let's say troubles here. So to have this fear above of all of that, it's not going to be easy on us. So it's not easy when you walk. Sorry, when you walk in the street, when I get the metro, I can see the fear in the eyes of the people, and actually just to mention a little bit something actually it's. I probably is gonna give you what I feel. I have the fear to speak in Arabic, as simple as that. To not making the people having to connect me with anything is happening there. So even the language become an accuse, even though that we are not related to what's happening. So that's it.
So Bayan, you're nervous. But are you detecting the way that people are reacting to you? Are they scared of you? Are they fearful of you?
It's not actually only me. The Syrian refugees here are having the obstacles of to the language. The language is not easy on us to learn, especially the French language. So it's difficult on us to express ourselves, to actually. To tell them that who we are, and when we are if something happened in the metro, if something happened in the street, they probably we can't say what's happening and what we should do, and we are not related, and just because of our Arab, because just because we are Arab or we are Syrians, it will be directly connected to what's happening, just because we are speaking in Arabic.
I can relate to the story with a case we have here in Paris, for example. A young mother of 2, like she was even scared to go beg outside. That's how it has become for refugees here. And the problem is that we keep using these people fleeing bombs, our own bombs actually, just to have a decent life, and we forgot any sense of humanity. And right now we have, for example, I keep speaking about this case. I mean, like I was born in Paris and I know my city pretty well. We had various spots around the city in Paris where we had refugees, and they would gather either to have meals from the neighbors or to be assisted by NGOs. And right after the attacks, for example, they completely vanished, and nobody knows where they are. Some of them were actually by the Bataclan concert hall and by the République Square in central Paris, and they also vanished. Some of them came forward with the banners saying that we also cry the dead after the Paris attacks, as if they had to justify themselves. But again, we live in a society where human lives mean nothing anymore. It's just about fueling marketing campaigns to get re-elected. And right now, as I said it earlier, since the left-wing government has been unable to counterattack on the ideological battlefield against the Front National, for example, or the what we call the hard right here in France, now it has been given reasons to implement that very same agenda, which is at the opposite side of their political ideology.
Yes, sir. What do you make of this border conversation? I've got an image here of the areas in Europe, and if you basically look on my laptop here, anywhere that's blue around here in Europe, you can pretty much go fairly freely. You can move around fairly freely. I'm just going to note here, this is a little dated map. Poland has actually closed its borders, so you will have border control when you go through from Poland. But most of these places around Europe, you can get back and forth really easily. And Stephen's argument was, that is not a good idea. Yasser, what do you make of this whole conversation about maybe Europe is too open, too free?
Europe was built on openness, and the European ideal is about one great continent with no borders. And right now what we're seeing, as in France and any other countries, we are moving steps backward to go back to the early 20th century. Closed borders, no capacity to move freely, and as you said it earlier, the attackers were European nationals. It doesn't matter if they went abroad and came back, regardless of how many passports they used.
But Yasser,
passport.
But I'm afraid, Yasser, you're missing the point. You're missing the point in two fundamental things. First of all, you are confusing the language of Europe and the European Union. Europe is around 50 to 51, depending on how you describe it, different countries. The European Union wishes to be a new country. Yes, and I was talking about the European Union. But you keep using the word Europe. Now you have to be more accurate. That when you're talking about the borders, you're talking about the borders of the countries within the European Union. This is not Europe. And secondly, when you're talking about the borders being put under control, how would you feel if you are one of the families now that has lost your children, lost your mother, lost your father because of a terrorist who was able to move so freely and so easily across this continent to blow them up? I think your argument is not correct for those families. It is not going backwards. We have to protect them, and the only way to protect them is monitoring by country by country.
Sir, my city was attacked. So please, don't use our grief to move forward your ideology, with all due respect. I'm the son of Paris.
And I personally was close to a bomb. I was close to a bomb in London twice. So the argument is, you want to have free, open borders to allow terrorists to move across the country. This is not right. Start being rational. Start understanding we have international terrorists here, and we have to adopt closed borders until we get this under
Stephen and
control.
Yasser, just allow me to bring Elias in. Elias, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I think what is really sad at this conversation, especially in point of Stephen, that he's trying to take these terrorist attacks and abuse them for a political agenda, for a political issue he wanted to push forward even way before the attacks. This whole thing about closing down Schengen, closing down sort of the EU at this point is a major step by UKIP, his party, for a long, long time. If you would take these bomb attacks seriously and not abuse them for your political agenda, then let's talk about terrorism. And that means let's talk about the situation of people, since they are French and Belgian nationalities, what they have been suffered for the last centuries. What about sort of these ghettos we have seen in Belgium as well in Paris? Let's talk about that. Or let's talk about our relationship to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, where we support states who actually support Wahhabism around the world, which is really a big part of ISIS and Daesh. Or if we want to talk about terrorism, let's talk about Syria. But just going back to your own political agenda, which has, in this case, like it's a demand you have been putting out for years and years and years on, and now just putting it back because you see sort of the windows of opportunity. I think this is really sad in the event which has happened.
I just have something to say.
Yes, Bayan. Go ahead, Bayan.
Yeah, I just want to say something. For if I was one of the people who lost a family member, so I will tell you that we lost a lot. We lost a lot of family members. My brother also attacked. He got injured, and so what I want to say that we are sorry of what's happening. And regarding of closing the border, it's not related to the Syrians. If you want to close the border, if you want to make a control on your border, it's fine, but it's not related to the refugee, because they are not related to what's happening. They are not related to this attack. This is something, and this is the refugee issue is something else, 100%. If you're gonna close, if the one person, he will apply to the embassy to get a visa, and he get the to reject this visa. So what he has to lose? He will go smuggling through the border. He has no other choice. He knows that he will die probably during the journey. So even though that he knows that he's gonna die, probably he's gonna do it just to have a life, not to destroy the place that they are going to. They know that probably they have the ability to survive after all if they do this journey. It's not easy on us. When the Syrian refugee left Syria, they don't want to. They just need a future.
I'm so glad that you're saying that, Bayan, because it's exactly what people online are telling us, that these refugees are going for greener pastures, but because they need a safe place to live. So with that in mind, I want to play this video comment from Siobhan, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Stephen, because this is another wrinkle in this conversation. Have a listen to her.
I think the horrifying photo of the little boy who washed up on the Turkish beach had a hugely galvanising effect on people's sense of humanity and sympathy for the refugees, and I think that was a really scary prospect for a lot of right-wing politicians, that now this Syrian passport contradicts. I think that if we look at this numerically, if a scientist was doing an experiment and they had one anomaly amongst thousands and thousands and thousands of effects that match the pattern they were expecting, they wouldn't abandon their theory. So why are we abandoning our borders?
So Stephen, numerically, one anomaly.
Well, I was saying many times, and I think I'm very clearly on record of saying that even if we do close the borders because we want to do so for what I call migration security, this doesn't then remove our responsibility to actually look at how we deal with the refugee crisis, or indeed how we take people in. I've actively gone out and said that the United Nations has failed in this regard on so many levels. We should have had an international conference last year when we knew that the crisis was brewing. Other countries in the Middle East, they are not taking any. China, for example, has 6 million square feet of meters of housing that is unused in areas where they need populations. Other countries are not taking people at all.
Stephen?
So until we get a solution of how we deal with the short term, we're not going to solve that problem either.
All right, so Stephen, as always, is a great catalyst for more conversation. We're going to do that with Yasser and Ilyas and Bayan. We're going to take our guests to our online post show at stream.aljazeera.com. But before we get there, we wanted to look at other stories about refugees and the refugee crisis and the connection with the Paris attacks that are going on online. Here's Malika with those.
Some U.S. citizens are saying no to Syrian refugees after the Paris attacks. That hashtag has been mentioned more than 15,000 times since the tragedy. Surfer Girl writes, "Close our borders. We are already full and broke and are having our own conflicts." Well, many U.S. politicians are echoing the sentiment.
Refugees are pouring into our great country from Syria. We don't even know who they are. They could be ISIS, they could be anybody. What's our president doing? Is he insane?
We cannot let terrorists take advantage of our compassion. This is a moment where it's better to be safe than to be sorry.
But U.S. President Barack Obama has vowed to take in at least 10,000 refugees. He argues turning them away would betray the country's deepest values. While others online are comparing the refugee crisis to the exodus of Jews from Nazi Germany, highlighted in these editorial cartoons, one from that time period and one from present day. Well, Ben in Ohio tweets, "There were those who warned about taking in German Jews in World War II. Do we want to be those people?" Well, despite all the backlash, many countries are welcoming refugees with open arms.
Refugees are welcome here.
In the UK, citizens are using the hashtag "Don't Let Them Freeze" in response to government's hold on refugees at the border. This was just one protest near Downing Street in London. In Scotland, many are sharing video messages of support and welcome.
This is a message for all the refugees arriving in Glasgow today. Welcome to Scotland. Our home is your home.
Well, this is a story that will continue to unfold online, and we'll be tracking it, so share your thoughts with hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Thanks very much for watching today's episode of The Stream. Coming up on Monday, we'll be looking at what is it like to live in France as a Muslim. We'll be doing that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. So we're talking about how the Paris attacks might change Western nations' response to the refugee crisis. Let's get right back to that conversation. Bayan, as you've been listening to our debate today, what do you make of it? You must be hearing these conversations all of the time. Are we missing something? Because this is your first anniversary of being in France.
France.
Is it a happy anniversary? Should I wish you a happy anniversary? How's it going?
I think so. We had actually, yes, now I'm a bit better. We settled down now a little bit, but we had a difficult year.
Okay.
It's not easy.
It's hard. Can you imagine any of us having to leave our home and then go live in another country and then learn a third language? You already speak English and Arabic and then French.
And Turkish.
And Turkish. Now she's showing off. And maintenant français. It's hard.
Oui.
Très difficile.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are we missing? What are we missing in our conversation?
We are missing that if you wanna, we had a lot in Syria. I had everything almost. I had my job, a decent job actually.
Yeah.
I had a house, I had a car, I had, all of that doesn't matter. What actually it's really matter is the people I grow up with and the neighborhood, friends, each one become in a different country. So it's almost impossible to reunion again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to leave all of that and to start your own life again in Turkey, and you have to start from the 0 point. And believe me, it's not easy. Especially I have my mother with me, so to change everything and to go back again from the 0 point and build something, especially the language, it's not easy. Each country you have to learn their language, and then again to destroy everything you build in Turkey, and then you need to start all over again in France. So it's been a difficult year.
I can definitely understand that, and I think our community can too. But some of them are now focusing on what the impetus of these attacks on refugees and this criticism of refugees, what that does to the larger situation with ISIL. So there's a tweet here I want to read from Omar. He says, blaming refugees equates to vindicating ISIS or ISIL. Their crusader infidel versus Islam binary does wonders when refugees are pigeonholed into the frame of bad guys. There's a difference between concern for security and stereotyping whole communities. So Yasser, I'll give that one to you. Do you think that this really plays into the hands of ISIL?
Definitely. Because listen to their rhetoric. We are going to send to you 1 million or whatever number they used as terrorists. I mean, what can they do worse to them? Chasing them from their own homes and then turning them into enemies wherever they go. And unfortunately, our extremist groups are falling into the very same trap. And I would like first to come back to what has been said earlier. I heard that Middle Eastern countries weren't doing their jobs in terms of welcoming refugees. Can we talk about Lebanon? Can we talk about Turkey, who welcomed 1.8 million refugees? Can we talk about Jordan? They are welcoming much more refugees than any European country altogether, and they are still doing their job. The problem is that we forgot how it all started. Saudi Arabia is not the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is a country in the Middle East. The other thing is that this refugee crisis can be rooted back.
Nor is any of the others around it.
Stephen, please let me finish. I was kind enough to let you finish. Let me finish, please. This refugee crisis started with the collapse of Iraq. Who collapsed Iraq? Tony Blair and George W. Bush. Can you, Stephen, tell us that what Tony Blair did was absolutely wrong? And if you do, did you condemn the war on Iraq back in 2003?
Well, I actually was one of the people who marched in 2003, the million of us that went through London opposing the war. So absolutely, yes, I was there way ahead of you. And actually, it wasn't just Tony Blair.
Actually,
it was the Australians, it was the Austrians, it was the Canadians.
It doesn't work, I'm sorry.
So when you're looking at what was the cause of Iraq, which is my main point about this, the causes of Iraq, the causes of Afghanistan were world problems where a large number of countries came together to cause a war. That is why I've been saying all along, this is not a European issue, but a world issue in which the United Nations should come together. in terms of that. And when you're looking at Saudi Arabia, you can also look at Dubai, you can also look at Kuwait, you can also look at all of those countries who are not accepting any. You can look at China, who's not taking any, Korea, that's not taking any.
So we're getting a little off
No
track.
one's taking any from Malaysia
I like it when a
or
conversation has
Singapore.
nuance, but we're getting a little off track here because we are really specifically looking at the refugee crisis as it is today and what happened on Friday and that incredible impact that just a few days, one event actually had on that situation. Ilyas, can you tell us in terms of your understanding of refugees coming into Germany, has anything changed? Are people being a little bit more careful about, are they checking passports? Are they, I'm just curious as to what the impact has been on a sort of very practical level.
Sure, I will immediately come to your question, but let me just put one sentence to Stephen, because I think comparing Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, China, and other countries, Korea, to sort of Europe, I mean, why is that in one line? We should have, in terms of human rights, in terms of our values, we should compare ourselves to much other countries than these ones. We should look at each other, not at the ones which we blame for human rights violation the most. So now getting back to your question regarding Germany.
Well, Korea's got violations.
It's not.
South
it's
Korea.
Not.
All right, gentlemen,
Sure,
I'm time out on this, okay? A political scientist and then Stephen Wolf from UKIP. We are not having that conversation. We are going to refocus our attention back on here. I know it is a broad conversation, but we only have so long to have it. So I'm just going to refocus us back. Ilyas, go ahead.
Yes, let me take that back to Germany at the moment. So what we're seeing is, yes, there is a lot of, what we're seeing at the moment is we've never seen so many people volunteering, so many people are going out helping and working on issues. This is very new for Germany, and it's a very new attitude. We have this attitude of a welcome culture I think we never really had before. We don't know where it's going. At the moment, I think there's a lot of helping hands. There's a lot of people who are supporting the claims of the Chancellor who said, yes, we can do that and we can manage this. And if you look at other countries, as we said before, Turkey has much more refugees. If you look at this tiny, very, very tiny land of Lebanon, who's packed with refugees at the moment, I think a country as Germany, who's a wealthy country in the middle of Europe, can manage to have a couple of 100,000 refugees easily. And I think this is what we're going to show. I think this is where we're going to go forward.
Yes, yeah, Bayan, you go ahead. You're our guest. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I just want to say that a little bit statistics on the OFRA, actually, the office was responsible on the refugee here in France, saying that since 2011 till 2004, it's only 5,200 persons who get refugee status or the subsidiary protection as a Syrian refugee here in France. So when you are talking about all the refugee, this is something else. But what's happening after what's happening in Paris? So they left all the refugee and they saying that this is the Syrian refugees' fault, which is not true.
See, Stephen, I'm wondering if border control is actually missing the point in this situation here, because the people who are the terrorists live in France and they live in Belgium and they're French and they're Belgian nationals. Maybe the approach might be to look at what is creating European terrorists. Okay, people who want to go and fight in Syria and want to come and do harm to their local communities. That, to me, when I was just looking at the list of the people who were believed to be either attackers or suspects, and they're all Belgium, France, born in Belgium. I was like, that's not an issue about borders so much. That's an issue about what's happening within their communities that's making them feel like they want to do harm to their neighbours. That, to me, seems like a much bigger problem than checking your passport as you go from, I don't know, Sweden to the Netherlands.
Well, I think there are two distinct problems there, and of course, one now seems to say that just because you're living in a deprived area and you're a deprived person, you therefore become a terrorist.
I didn't say that. I didn't mention deprivation. But Stephen, there are parts in the UK, there are parts in France, there are parts of Australia where young people are going to Syria or going to Iraq to fight. it's not necessarily about passports that we're talking about here. It's about their environment. I didn't say deprived. In fact, some of them are far from that.
Yes, but those who are leaving our countries are able to move from Britain and get over to Turkey very easily because they're not stopped at the borders all the way there. And as I said, the leader of this particular group of people who carried out these attacks was able to move very freely backwards and forwards through Europe.
Now you're repeating yourself, and you made that point very clearly at the beginning.
But I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, if you may interrupt. Okay, on what ground can we stop someone from traveling to Turkey? Just on what ground?
What grounds? If you've got a border control system that's in place, then the security services are able to monitor those people much more quickly from those who are suddenly saying that they've left the UK, for example, or France or Belgium, and you're able to track them. That is the whole purpose of the border system that you have. If you don't have a border system, you can't track them and you can't find them so easily.
So what you're asking for is to track every single person.
But that's what happened. But that then if you don't already understand that's what's happening now, when you
see,
if you don't understand that's what a border agency system already does now,
Stephen and Yasser
then you're missing the point.
I heard that, and I understood that very clearly. And Stephen makes a point, and it probably wouldn't stop somebody who was really, really determined. And also, if they had a national passport, they can go wherever pretty much they like. But it was really the bigger problem, I think, of actually how did they get to be in that position in the first place? That is a conversation probably for a whole new show. I want to leave us with our online community.
Who are taking it back to the central topic of today's show, which was the refugee crisis. And Marzi sums up saying the need of the hour is giving the refugees proper place for shelter with all the screening and monitoring.
Bayan, Ilyas, Yasser and Stephen, thank you so much for the debate, the conversation we had today, and for your insights. We really appreciate it. Many thanks. Take care, everybody.